from the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letz.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, winner of the Southern Oregon Television Award for Program of the Year and the award for Best Educational Program. I'm the host and producer, John Letz. Ramping Up Your English is an educational support program for intermediate English learners. It's a program for people from all language backgrounds. Ramping Up Your English is also for people of all ages. If you've already passed the beginning stages of learning English, and you want to reach higher levels of proficiency, this program is designed to meet your needs. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our current thematic unit is animals.
This is segment 1 of episode 69. As more and more land is degraded, Americans look to public land to provide needed refuge for wild animals. In fact, refuge is exactly the word that's used for areas set aside for the benefit of wildlife. The United States has a whole system of wildlife refuges. Let's learn more about them in this video. We all enjoy the sight of wildlife, but the way we live takes away habitat that wildlife needs to survive. In order to make up for habitat loss, wildlife refuges have been established. In southern Oregon and northern California, the upper and lower Klamath wildlife refuges are here for migrating birds. My wife Liz and I spent a day exploring the lower Klamath Wildlife Refuge. These wetlands occur naturally in this region, but much land has been drained and used for farming. This area has been set aside for wildlife, mostly birds. Over 100 years ago, wildlife conservationists had a friend in the White House, Theodore Roosevelt, who set aside federal lands for wildlife. 100 years later, these places are more important than ever, with thousands of acres getting covered each year for shopping malls, housing developments, and parking lots. A critical factor for the lower Klamath Wildlife Refuge is water. It's what makes this place of value to migrating birds, both the water itself and the food the water facilitates. While supporting wildlife is the main function of the refuge system, there's a lot for people who want to observe wildlife, like this shelter for bird watchers. Bird lovers flock to this area of the refuge to see the winter gathering of bald eagles. It's quiet during the rest of the year. While the lower Klamath is a lifeline for migratory birds, local birds, like these red-winged blackbirds, find the refuge a high-quality habitat for themselves. The lower Klamath Refuge struggles with getting enough water. A report by Jess Burns in Jefferson Monthly Magazine reveals the challenge of receiving adequate water from the government, resulting in far fewer birds benefiting from the refuge. Water from nearby reservoirs is claimed by farmers, fishermen, and Native American tribes, a balancing act that usually leaves part of the refuge dry. We spent our time along the wet areas, hoping to see more wildlife there. We weren't disappointed. We watched grebes like this one and ducks. These are aquatic birds. Everything they do seems to depend on water. Birds like grebes and ducks are called waterfowl. The lower Klamath Refuge was established via executive order by President Theodore Roosevelt in 1908 as the nation's first waterfowl refuge. There are over 500 refuges for wildlife in the United States. Most have websites you can visit to learn what each one offers. Raptors like these are very much a part of the Klamath Lake refuges. Education is an important part of the mission of the system of wildlife refuges in the United States. That's a mission updated by Congress several times since that system was organized at the dawn of the 20th century. The Lower Klamath Lake Wildlife Refuge takes that function seriously with interpretive signage, a great visitor center, and programs for schools. The Lower Klamath has an unexpected arrangement with local farmers. Farmers can raise crops in the refuge in exchange for the refuge using farmland to provide refuge for migrating birds. This arrangement can help with the refuge's greatest challenge, getting enough water. These ducks lined up to watch the water intake as if making sure enough water was there. There are abundant roads through the Lower Klamath Refuge, giving access to motorists and to people on bikes. This road took Liz and me to an awesome sight, coots. Coots are migratory birds, often found in wetlands. Coots from the Pacific Northwest can be found as far south as Panama in the winter. American coots eat algae and other aquatic plants, as well as some small animals. Coots stay with the same mate for life. Coots build several nests on the water for laying eggs. The American coot defends the eggs and chicks from predators, although muskrats are a danger. Coots are also called mud hens, the name adopted by a Toledo baseball team. In Louisiana, coots are known as poule-doux. They're not as eagerly hunted as ducks, but they sometimes make their way into the gumbo pot. The American coot is listed as least concern in terms of extinction danger. Scientists use coots to determine pollution problems in wetland environments. During our visit, Liz and I saw a familiar sight of geese. Its location on the Pacific Flyway makes the Lower Klamath a popular refuge for migrating geese. People flock to the refuge in winter, although geese have little to do with that. Bald eagles gather here in January on their southward migration, attracting excited birdwatchers from all over the country. In fact, winter is when the Lower Klamath Refuge has the most impressive populations of migrating birds. Another refuge on the Pacific Flyway is the Don Edwards San Francisco Bay Wildlife Refuge. Along with the Coyote Hills Regional Park, birds and other wildlife find refuge here. We watched egrets spear some meals here, hunting the shallow waters for fish, frogs, and other small animals. It's not surprising to see that this refuge consists of wetlands. It depends on a reliable source of water. This refuge receives numerous visitors during the migrating season, owing to its location near this large population center.
That one has some sort of pine.
In terms of bird numbers, there are very few in the summer. We didn't need to see a lot of birds, though. This one put on quite a show.
He stirs at the bottom with his feet. When the macroinvertebrate or whatever comes up to the surface, then he spears it.
This technique seems to work as well on the mud flats as in the water. Watch it scoop up another part of its meal. We saw swallows, dippers, hawks, and other species, but this bird held our interest for the longest time. We even learned a thing or two about its techniques for flushing out food. Although it's inside of the Dumbarton Bridge, this refuge seems a world apart from this densely populated urban area. Further north along the Pacific Flyway, an entire island among the San Juan Islands provides refuge for wildlife, like these harbor seals. Other wildlife supported here includes the night heron and the great blue heron. Of special interest to me is the murrelet. This incredible bird nests in old-growth forest. It will build its nest up to 60 miles inland to lay its eggs. Then it flies those 60 miles back to the ocean to catch fish, and it brings those fish back to its chicks, going back and forth to nourish its young. Without the old-growth forest, the murrelet can't survive or reproduce.
They're what, Rachel? Marbled mullet.
The island also provides refuge for cormorants. These birds are easy to identify by the way they dry out their wings, spreading them like this after diving for food. Cormorants are usually seen near water. A look at their bills further informs us of their diet. Another great blue heron flies by as we circle the island in a skiff. The public is not allowed on the island. Officials enforce this rule for the benefit of the wildlife. This effort seems to pay off. This area is teeming with birds. In addition to the wildlife refuge system, other areas provide a haven for animals. The Elkhorn Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve provides field laboratories for scientific research and education about estuaries. Elkhorn Slough also provides essential habitat for over 700 species.
That's all for segment 1. We'll be back with segment 2 right after this.
The pelicans of Pismo Beach. Learn how these California brown pelicans survive DDT to reclaim their coastal habitat. Watch Ramping Up Your English on RVTV Voices. This is segment 2 of episode 69. Some wildlife refuges in the United States have been in existence for over 100 years. This bird was probably the first to be protected by law. Over 2,000 years ago, Africa's sacred ibis was protected by a law that imposed the death penalty for anyone killing one of these birds, even by accident. Sacred ibises could be found in royal palaces during the Golden Age of Egypt. The remains of some have been found buried with pharaohs. Sadly, the sacred ibis is now extinct in Egypt. However, they are common in sub-Saharan Africa. In North America, Canada geese are protected by access to wildlife refuges and hunting regulations. They aren't endangered, but Canada geese are widely hunted as game, and that hunting is regulated by game wardens. I remember hearing that in Louisiana it was against the law to sneak up on a goose. Hunters could wait in a blind and shoot when the goose comes within range, but sneaking up on them was strictly prohibited. These geese live in Oregon. Oregonians can see these geese year-round, even when they raise their young, called goslings. These geese are found at the Denman Wildlife Area near Medford, Oregon. Most geese are migratory. They migrate to the north to reproduce, where their young are less vulnerable to predators. Then they make these great migrations south in winter. They need wildlife refuges during this great migration. Geese often spend winter in Louisiana, where there's plenty to eat and it's not frozen like the north. Snow geese also migrate to Louisiana during the winter. Snow geese populations are strong, numbering in the millions. They breed on the Arctic tundra. As soon as the goslings learn to fly, it's time to head south. Post-harvest rice fields are a favorite winter stopover, where they gorge on grain that's been spilled. They need to fatten up for their summer migration back to the tundra. Their great migrations are one of the wonders of nature. The sky fills with the large flocks flying in V formation. Some flocks travel over 2,000 miles without stopping. When the flock lands to eat and rest, they post guards at the edge of the flock to warn of danger. With all the challenges faced by wildlife, it's heartening to see some species flourish. Hearing the squawks and hanks of migrating geese, or just seeing a few of them floating on the river, we're reminded of the riches of nature. The United States is not alone in providing refuges for wildlife. Worldwide, critical habitat is set aside. While important for all wildlife, these areas are especially critical for endangered species. Along with the wildlife refuge system, some areas are set aside and managed for the study of wildlife. We'll learn about that and more when we see part 2 of the video on wildlife refuges. This ends segment 2 of episode 69. We'll return with segment 3 after this.
Get away, get away now. Get away, get away, get away now. Take a plane, take a train, take a car. Just get away, get away, get away now. Don't need to be far, just get away, get away, get away now.
Hi, I'm Regina Ayers and the host of Getaway Girl. Join me to learn how travel can open you up to new people, new experiences, and new inspirations. You can take on a new persona when you travel, lighter, freer, more willing to be spontaneous and able to just go with the flow. I know I do. You can join me and travel around the world. Join me soon for Getaway Girl.
Get away, get away now. Get away, get away, get away now. Take a plane, take a train, take a car. Just get away, get away, get away now. Don't need to be far, just get away, get away, get away now.
You're watching Ramping Up Your English. This is segment 3.
This is episode 69. Today we're focusing on wildlife refuges. In this episode, you've seen part 1 of a video on wildlife refuges. How much of this part did you understand? From time to time, it's important to chart your growth in listening comprehension. This episode is a good time to do that. Over time, I think you'll see that percentage going up, especially near the end of the unit. We'll show part 2 of the video on wildlife refuges soon. Be sure to note your percentage of comprehension with that part as well. Now that you know you'll record your comprehension, it'll be interesting to see if there's a difference between the two parts. Keep this information in your notebook for future reference. This is also where you could be keeping notes and writing your animal report. Now, let's learn more about special places for wildlife. In addition to the wildlife refuge system, other areas provide a haven for animals. The Elkhorn Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve provides field laboratories for scientific research and education about estuaries. Elkhorn Slough also provides essential habitat for over 700 species. Some endangered species live here. Wildlife recovery efforts can be seen with the return of the sea otters. Elkhorn Slough is their main refuge. Sea otters had almost disappeared due to hunting for their soft, thick fur. At Elkhorn Slough, scientists can observe wildlife in a healthy ecosystem. Parts of this reserve were bought up piece by piece at a time by the Nature Conservancy. This otter seemed right at home among these harbor seals. While preserving this special area began with the Nature Conservancy, management of the area is provided by the Elkhorn Slough Foundation. The foundation owns some of the land here. They welcome visitors to explore the slough and learn about this natural treasure. The Elkhorn Slough Foundation has a visitor center from which visitors can easily enjoy the view of wildlife and the beauty of the surrounding area. Here we saw terns diving high speed into the water. Observation is a great way to learn about nature. While we thrilled at seeing a handful of pelicans during our spring trip, our guide told us that thousands of pelicans make Elkhorn Slough their home during the winter. Observation wasn't only with our eyes. We could hear and smell this haul-out of California sea lions. Given this refuge, the wildlife at Elkhorn Slough have open access to and from the Pacific Ocean. License plates in Louisiana used to carry the words "Sportsman's Paradise," referring to all the opportunities to hunt and fish. Cameron Prairie National Wildlife Refuge is one of several refuges in the coastal marsh. It shares administration with several others offering this visitor center. There are many animals of the marsh here, including Louisiana's official reptile, the American alligator. Now, when it comes to gators, the rule is look, but don't feed. That rule applies to the largest national refuge in Louisiana, the Sabine National Wildlife Refuge. Louisiana's Great Salt Marshes supports a burgeoning number of wildlife. That wildlife finds refuge and protection in a number of refuges, including the Sabine National Refuge in Cameron Parish. I took my wife and father-in-law to this nature trail in the Sabine Refuge, a chance to show off the rich wildlife in my native state. The only thing that's not flat in this marsh is this observation deck in the distance. My father-in-law had walked enough, but Liz continued for the promise of an elevated view. You can see that we're dressed for chilly weather. I was hoping that discomfort wouldn't keep the wildlife away. Among other animals here, I was hoping to spot an alligator. From this vantage point, we enjoyed a sweeping view of the salt marsh that makes up the Sabine National Refuge. Now, if we couldn't see an alligator, I was hoping we'd at least see a roseate spoonbill, the bird featured on their website. We did spot the kind of hole in the mud where alligators burrow in when the weather gets too cold. I should explain that Liz did not share my goal of seeing an alligator. All we needed to do was look up. We seemed to be greeted by a flyover by this group of pelicans. I jokingly call them the Louisiana Air Force. Louisiana's state bird is the pelican, but it's the brown pelican that's a state bird. These are white pelicans, the same species we see when canoeing at Upper Klamath Wildlife Refuge in Oregon. Since Klamath Lake sometimes freezes over in winter, these could be visitors from Oregon, like us. Maybe they were here to greet us. Looking down at the marsh also rewarded us with the sight of a majestic bird. Now, this was no roseate spoonbill, but it's one of those great birds that were hunted almost to extinction for their feathers. It's because of that ridiculous practice that it's against the law to possess feathers from a wild bird. These are wading birds. In flight, you can see the long legs ending in those feet well behind the tail. This is no roseate spoonbill, but it is a glorious sight flying over the marsh. Far in the distance, we spotted these white pelicans. They look as though they're plotting some kind of a conspiracy, or perhaps they're gossiping about these Oregonians who followed them 2,000 miles to Louisiana. We saw signs of lesser birds in the refuge. These hanging basket nests are typical of blackbirds, but other species make them as well. I'm sure it was the larger birds that inspired the creation of the Sabine National Wildlife Refuge, like this great blue heron. Look at those long, stilty legs. Herons are usually seen fishing alone. Night herons are also solitary, waiting patiently on a stream bank like this one. Patience is also needed by this lone human fishing in Calcasieu Lake. The Sabine is the largest coastal marsh refuge on the U.S. Gulf Coast. Over 200 species of birds spend their time here. One species is the roseate spoonbill, a bird I wanted to see during my visit. The bird I was most likely to see here is a duck. Here along the wetland waterway, I saw ducks in small groups. I kept my eyes open for alligators. I'm told there's a great number of them here. These ducks share this wetland with American mink, muskrat, river otters, and turtles. Blue crabs too, but this isn't where people catch them. As if checking on us Oregonians, the white pelicans returned for another flyover. Pointing it in the distance, a huge flock appeared. I had trouble deciding whether to point down or up. I'm no expert in identifying birds, but I can sometimes name the species of common birds. I was stumped by this one. The short, thin beak and long V-shaped wings were not familiar to me. A challenge like this is a good reason to visit a wildlife refuge. Most national wildlife refuges welcome visitors, and some permit hunting and fishing if that keeps things in balance. While we didn't see any alligators, much to the relief of my wife, I did see a pink dot in the sky. Could this be the spoonbill that had eluded me? From this distance, it's hard to see the spoon-shaped tip of its bill. As it banks in flight, I see enough to know that this is the bird I was hoping to see here. I wasn't alone in the excitement. Like birds, people flock to the national wildlife refuges like the Sabine. It's a great deal for the wildlife and the people who admire it.
I want to thank my director, Denise Ross, the RVTV staff, and my talented and loyal crew. And I want to thank you, our viewers. All of you helped to make this program an award winner. Join us next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letz.